I'm so glad you came back. Sit down, sit down. For today's class in cryptozoological gastronomy, let's talk about kelpies. When it comes to charisma, kelpies have it in spades. Having seen them in person, I know how beautiful they are up close. They have this beautiful, sleek white body. It looks like they have fur, but it's actually a collection of tiny scales, head to toe. Even their hooves aren't what they seem. They're actually modified fins attached to the end of their legs. Then there's the mane and tail, which are obviously piscine. The tail is a long fin, fairly similar to a mermaid's, but with a wider fin. Like cats, the kelpie's tail is relative to its size, and it helps the kelpie to keep balance and turn in the water. Some collectors really prize a perfectly kept kelpie tail. The mane is a collection of seaweed. At first, researchers were really confused how the kelpie had seaweed for a mane. Since actually mermen stick seaweed into their scalps, where they also keep their eggs during breeding season, so how could a creature without hands like the kelpie do that? The answer lies in the kelpie's physiology. After carefully plucking out every piece of seaweed, researchers found that the kelpie has folds all along the top of its body. The prevailing theory is that when kelpies swim through kelp forests, the kelp will stick on. Another theory is that the folds in the kelpie's neck just so happen to be a perfect place for kelp seeds to make their home and start to germinate. Presuming either of these theories are true, then the kelp serves two purposes. One, as a protective cover for the kelpie and its gills, or two, as a source of food in times of scarcity. Kelpies are omnivorous, unlike horses.
This next fact is a little upsetting, so don't go repeating it to everybody all willy-nilly, but horses can eat meat, too. Back home, I once saw a horse eat a bird.
Anyway, are you curious about their gills? Kelpies are capable of breathing both above and below water. To ensure these systems don't get mixed up, kelpies close their noses below water and close their gills above water. It's really hard to see, but the kelpie's gills are along where their jaw and neck meet. Now, let's talk about the stories surrounding kelpies outside of dungeons. They seem to be one of the few monsters who don't need a high concentration of mana to survive, so they tend to appear close to human settlements. Most of their stories come from the southern continent. That area has a lot of watery terrain, so stories about kelpies sometimes get confused for other creatures. If you hear a story about a kelpie taking the form of a beautiful woman, that's actually a rusalka or other type of water nymph. And if you hear about a terrifying water horse, it might actually be an ikushka, which are really different from kelpies and way more dangerous. Outside of a dungeon, you'll really only encounter kelpies around rivers and streams. Some stories mention children coming up to pet the kelpie and find themselves stuck to the kelpie's fur and then dragged down to the water that way. While it's true that kelpie scales are sticky, they aren't that sticky. Actually, they're more likely to get caught up in the kelp, so that's maybe where the story comes from. Some stories also mention that kelpies' hooves are backwards from a regular horse, but for whatever reason, we don't see that in dungeons. I really want to travel to the southern continent and confirm these stories for myself. In all the stories, and in the dungeon too, the kelpie's main method of attack is to lure someone onto their back. Once a rider is there, they take their victim underwater and attack. That's where you see the most distinct differences from a horse. Horses, like humans, have circular eyes, but kelpies have horizontal slit pupils, like a sheep. Horses have a front set of teeth and a gummy space, and then a set of molars in the back. This helps them graze efficiently. But kelpies have a set of razor-sharp teeth and canines in the front for tearing into their victim, and a set of molars in the back to help chew. Those teeth are sharp enough to break through armor, so in the unlucky situation that you're underwater with them, you'll have to have someone attack from behind. Now, for how you prepare them, let's start from the head and make our way down to the tail. I assume you can eat eyes and brains, but they're too dangerous to prepare in the dungeon. Senshi always discarded those parts. With the neck, there's a lot of fat there. Kelpie fat is prized for the oil it produces. It can be used or incorporated with a variety of soaps, like for hair or for dishes. Marcel told me about it later, but apparently some adventurers kill kelpies and harvest their fat to be brought back up top and sold for a nice price. Only caveat is you have to travel quickly. You can't really eat anything on the front, so let's move to the midsection. The back meat can be made into sirloin, shoulder roast, or rib roast. Like cows, you can make tenderloin out of the muscle that attaches the spine to the pelvis. The liver inside is edible and rich in vitamins and iron. If you have a party member who lost a lot of blood recently, feed them the liver. Then there's the flank cut, taken from the meat around the ribs. It's really fatty and tender, so I recommend saving it as a kind of dessert. Then there's the round meat, over by the kelpie's hindside. The thigh meat here is pretty good grilled. Finally, we have the tail. Senshi said the tail meat is too tough to eat if it's grilled, so he recommends trying to stew it for a really long time over low heat. The fin, unfortunately, is too tough to eat. So, that's the kelpie. Do you have any questions?